My guest, Natalia Meehan, will soon be a name that you know, as her non-speaking sister Nina and her were going to be on season 2 of the telepathy tapes talking about plants. But she's also, as well as Nina, featured in the documentary coming out next year. Now, I have spent over 3 decades learning about the intricacies and sensitivities of the autism body. As an herbalist, Natalia deeply understands how fragile and fine tuned these bodies can be. So today, we're going to explore gentle, minimally invasive tools to help these beautiful bodies thrive. Welcome, Natalia.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm so happy to talk with you.
I gotta tell you, meeting you, in Atlanta was definitely one of the highlights for me. Let's talk about that because we both were so privileged to be amongst this group in Atlanta. I haven't talked about it much on the podcast yet, but basically this whole premise started by just a few friends wanting to get together at Libby's house to who's John Paul's mom, to be able to talk about the ways that we can bring more of this spelling and telepathy combined world out to the public. And what happened was a 35 people group who were so passionate about it that we just kind of went wild and really have this incredible conference being formed right now that we're super excited to share with all of you soon. I mean, it was incredible to be there.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I feel like this community and this time is very, very special because it's been what I've been waiting for many, many years. And to be able to talk about things so openly with so much love and support and brainstorming with each other and having everyone be so passionate was super inspiring for me. And I'm like very charged up from it.
Well, meeting you was a highlight, and part of it is if when you see Natalia, she is clearly outwardly a very beautiful individual, but she is inwardly as beautiful, and I could tell immediately your incredible compassion. And I think the piece that I really wanna start with here is how sensitive your sister, my son, these children, these adults now are and how we can best support their bodies because so much of medicine is built in these kind of harsh approaches of you got a problem, fix it. Here's the medication, do the surgery, whatever it might be, and fix it, as opposed to gradually letting the body heal itself. Now, as you may or may not know, I was married to a pediatrician who became a holistic pediatrician. And one of the things he used to preach all the time is the body is so incredibly brilliant and it knows how to get better. You just need to give it the tools and not give it the poisons to allow it to work at its best ability. So,
Mhm.
would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's been really beautiful to study herbal medicine because I think, as a disclaimer, like all medicine is good. It's just about the way that it's used and when and why. And with herbs, there's this tradition of healing that's called the vitalist tradition. And it really focuses on the fact that all bodies have this vital life force and that we
Mhm.
are these regenerative beings. And while we're sleeping, while we're doing things all day long, our bodies are constantly in regeneration and repair.
Yes.
And we don't even have to think about it, it's just automatic. And so in herbalism, we really look at the body as this beautiful organism that is self-healing. And when things go out of balance, like how to bring things back into balance. And it's fascinating because it gets into the study of energetics and how each person can have a different constitution, and how that can work with herbs. And the power of working with herbs is almost like matchmaking. It's like you're finding out what's going on with somebody's body, and then you're finding out how herbs could be of support. And I love plants in general because they are these allies we have all around us, and there's so many ways to engage with them
Mm.
that are really soothing to us and nourishing to us. And I think a lot of people are used to this approach to healing as this like heroic approach where you're pushing yourself and you have to go through pain and you have to suffer and all these things, but I would say sometimes that is necessary, but other times it's really important to be gentle, to be nourishing, um, to honor that too, because we can go too far in that intense direction. Um, and I think a lot of people have experienced that.
I think everyone has experience because, it's so funny. Another thing John used to say is they aren't side effects, they're effects. Like like
Mm,
if they're creating an effect, they are an effect. And
mm-hmm,
and we can't dismiss that something that might help in one area could deeply hurt in another. And part of that reason is, to my understanding, is that the whole plant isn't being used. I mean, so much in the way of medications are an extract of a plant. But the
mm-hmm,
problem is, it was intended to have the whole plant. And when we pull out just the part of it that's going to fix this one thing, we're pulling out the whole general intention of the plant to be able
mm-hmm,
to work and assimilate better in our body. And although I want to talk about a lot of things that, ways that we can support, I also really want to be able to talk to you about just energetically how these plants can connect, especially to our kids. And I want to start with something that somebody told me one time, and that she was very much into reading energies and such. And she had said to me, Joey is more plant than he is animal. And it's so funny. I didn't really understand that. But now, as I observe Joey walking through the forest day after day, and his need to be by the water and touching the earth, I'm starting to understand that too. As human beings, we are related to plants, right?
mm. Yeah, well, there's so much to say about that too. I think for all of us, you know, we are able to regulate in nature and to be able to go out into the forest and to ground and to see all of the greenery and to feel at peace is something that we don't always have access to in our modern Western culture. And that's a part of how we've co-evolved with plants. And that's something that Nina talks about all the time. I think that's something Joey and Nina have in common is hiking and being outdoors and feeling the relaxation that comes from attuning to the rest of the natural world. And I think people sometimes forget that we are a part of nature. We are nature. We're not separate from nature, even though we might feel like it in our little homes and in our little buildings, you know.
Right. Truly.
But but we are a part of this greater ecosystem. And so connecting with that can be extremely beneficial. And there's so many routes we can take to discuss that. I think it is more of a Japanese term where it came from, was just forest bathing. It talks about the medicinal qualities of being out in the forest. And I think some doctors in Japan actually prescribe that for patients, like taking a rest period and going out and forest bathing. And it's really cool because when you learn
Yeah.
about the aromatherapy and the way that we're breathing in all of these chemicals from the trees, it makes so much sense. So I love that.
It was when I was in the Black Forest in Germany years ago. It was probably 15 years ago. There was a resort there, and I had talked to several people that were staying there who were prescribed to go there by their doctor. It was supported by the medical system for them to go and to be in the forest. So I think that is still something. I don't know if that's still happening in Germany today, but I definitely feel like as a prescription, it's so funny because I know certainly as a mother, and we have this minimal amount of funds that are allocated to our child's therapy, that we somehow feel that the more we spend, the better the better chance that we're giving them. I mean, even when it comes to like the letter board, the amount of people that come back to me and say, well, surely an AAC device that is electronic, surely technology has made that more effective than a simplicity of the letterboard. And I think the same skeptics would be, well, certainly going to a sensory gym is going to be more effective than a walk in the forest. But I think that's part of the problem with our culture is we tend to feel that we have to spend something a lot and sacrifice in order to get the benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was drawn to herbal medicine in the first place. It's often referred to as the people's medicine because it's something that can be accessible to everybody once we learn more about it. And I think that's what's so empowering about it is that you can go outside in your local community, in your front lawn, and find herbal medicine if you know what you're looking at and how to engage with it. And it's free. um,
Exactly.
so that's
Exactly.
that's really empowering once you realize that. And also, yeah, I come back to this all the time, but sometimes the simple things are the most effective, uh, including the letterboard, but also just stripping things back down to what's your sleep quality? Are you going to the bathroom regularly?
Are
How
you
are you?
drinking water? Are you
Yeah,
drinking
like,
water? Like,
yeah,
why is that such a hard one for so many people? That's a
yeah,
tough one. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, keep
No,
going.
no. That it's just very true, sometimes it's these simple acts that can be the most impactful, so I love that you brought that up.
Well, I feel that as much as I want to talk about food today, because obviously our bodies need plants and we're definitely going to move into that. But I feel as ways to support the autism body that I have about 27 years experience in the medical, more holistic medical mind of working with the autism body. And when somebody comes to me and they say, if I had to do one supplement to help my child in the best way possible, what would it be? And I always tell people it's got to be something for detoxification because their sensitive bodies are getting so much poisons and unhealthy environmental toxins into them over and over and over. And if they don't have the tools and if their liver is unable to purge it, there is nothing more challenging for their nervous system than to have a very heavy toxic overload.
Mhm.
So, as somebody who was in this field with John, you know, choices with things such as that, if they can swallow pill, I'm a big person with artichoke extract. It thins the bile. If it's somebody who's not going to take a pill, then something like dandelion tea or things such as that can be incredibly beneficial. What are some of your go-tos for simple detoxification?
Yeah, so this is a very important topic too, and I think bringing it back to food, what gets overlooked a lot of times is gut health. And I think that is a good place to start with everybody, but especially with non speakers because of their sensitivity. And it can seem like a really challenging feat if you're dealing with somebody who has historically had picky eating or extreme preferences with food. And that was my experience with Nina for the majority of her life. And just changing food alone can make all the difference. And I think starting with gut health is key because that affects absorption, that affects the immune system, that affects mental health. It affects so many different things. And I believe that around 46 to 84% of people with autism have some sort of gut health
I
issue.
wouldn't be surprised if it's 80 to 90%, but
Yeah.
that's just what's being reported. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So there's so many different ways that herbs can be of assistance for that. starting with things like calendula or marshmallow root or these soothing demulcent herbs that help like line the mucosal lining in the gut, but then also just focusing on whole foods. I think there's a lot of discourse about diet, and it can seem really overwhelming for families and parents to even make meals and get somebody to eat something different. And I think there's a lot of this or that online too. But I would say the biggest thing would to be focusing on foods that come from the earth and that aren't coming from a package or a can. And that can also sound like a really big feat to tackle, but there's different ways to approach that. That's the starting point for me a lot of times. Um, and I will notice too that if something is going on with detoxification or liver health and bile flow, starting with healing the gut can be really helpful for even other herbs and supplements to be properly absorbed.
Yes.
So, um, that's always my first line of
And it's a good
defense.
one. So let's talk about this gut-brain connection.
Yeah.
And if you say there is no gut-brain connection, if somebody wants to go out there and say, no, gut-brain connection doesn't exist, well, then let me ask you this. How does your medication work? Why does the caffeine immediately wake you up? How is it that a glass of wine can make you relax? If we don't acknowledge the fact that things that we are putting in our gut are in fact going up and traveling to the brain, then why is it that we will dismiss that we can put an unrecognizable substance into the gut, often very, very toxic, several times a day and not have a consequence?
Mhm.
How is it that you wouldn't recognize that food actually is going to affect our thoughts, our processing, our anxiety, all of that? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. I know you.
Yeah.
I guess that was a rhetorical question. 'Cause
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's I guess for some people, like I just have some notes here about how metabolites produced in the gut or by the gut bacteria rather, can cross into systemic circulation and influence brain signaling, which is what often people associate with leaky gut.
yeah.
Um, and there's been multiple studies with people with ASD finding that like probiotics could help improve a level of zonulin that helps with intestinal permeability and like making your gut tighter and the barrier or the lining of your gut more resilient, and how that affects people's mood and overall health and sleep. So I think it's really well known in the scientific literature by this point. Um, it's just about actually implementing it into our lives and
Right.
taking it seriously and knowing that this is actually something that we're all kind of struggling with because of our current food system and
Yes.
all the things that we're exposed to. Um, but especially for some of the non-speakers or people who have heightened sensitivity or may have issues with methylation or detoxification and getting things flowing with their drainage funnel going through their body, like eliminating things. Yeah, I mean, there's endless things to say when it comes to the gut, but I think going back to the ecosystem and why it's really important to be out in nature and grounding and letting our feet touch the earth or letting our hands be in the soil is because we're finding that the soil health in the earth, in the ground, is a direct mirror for our gut health. And our gut is actually made up of so many different microbes. And this microbiology or all these different microbes affect how we feel. We have like a whole terrain inside of our body, and there's a lot going on, but having some exposure to beneficial bacteria is really, really helpful. And there's a lot of studies on that too, of how getting that exposure can increase mood and lift depression and all these different things that affect our mental health.
I could not agree more. That is 100% right. And if you're looking for ways to get that exposure, I mean, for one, let your kids play in the dirt. That's part of the issue is even at playgrounds, they have these like wood chips that who knows what the heck they're treated with. But kids never even get to chance to touch the dirt because you're 100% right. We do get beneficial bacteria from that dirt.
And then on the flip side of that, like kind of what you were talking about earlier with the idea of toxins, or maybe the word is dysbiosis of these microbes, the issue can become where there's this imbalance of more harmful microbial life that's thriving inside of us that can result in all kinds of health issues. There's a lot of ways to approach that with herbs. And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to before.
Let's talk about some of those herbs. One other thing I want to mention, though, is I remember there were several studies that I had looked at regarding families that have animals that have access to the outdoors
Mm.
tend to have a better microbiome within their households because the animals are touching the healthy bacteria and bringing them into the house. Have you ever
Mhm.
heard that one before as well?
Yeah, I have heard of that. And I guess this would be another disclaimer for parents or just for people in general,
Yeah.
is to really watch out for the things that could, I don't know, I don't like the word destroy, but like impair our microbiome, which are things like pesticides
Yeah.
and these things that are designed to kill beneficial and harmful microbes of all kinds, but we don't realize it when we're spraying our entire lawn and dousing it on our in our homes, and then we're feeling the effects in our gut health. So I would just say to watch out for that if people
Such a
haven't
good
heard
point.
about that.
Oh, Natalia, thank you. That's a really important point to give because we do want to make sure that our kids are touching directly to the earth and not all of these pesticides that they're getting exposed to. And you know what I always find the irony is how many people will scrub their vegetable to the very end, even peeling it to get off the pesticides, but then have no problem with with it like being underfoot and
Hmm.
with running all over it. And we're getting it so strongly transdermally that it's something to always be aware of. So thank you for bringing that up because I think it is a big piece of it. But in talking about the gut health, and as you know, I have a class on picky eating, and I've worked with picky eaters for decades, and that was something that we immediately bonded on. Um, eh, the whole gut health piece is what creates the catch-22, the vicious circle of poor eating, because the cravings that we get for food stem from the gut health.
Hmm.
And the worse the health of the gut is, the worse the cravings are. So the pickier the eater will be. And the
Yes.
problem is that if you try to do it on willpower, but you've got a gut that's doing nothing but craving the bad,
Yeah.
it just perpetuates and it makes it very hard to get off the cycle. So when I see these feeding programs that's all about behavioral, where it's all about, try this, I'm like, you can't do it that way.
I've dealt with this personally, and this has been a lifelong journey for me with finding out how to incorporate healthy eating into my own personal life. And this is so important. I mean, it can feel like an impossible task to not eat sweets or to not eat these foods that our microbiome has become used to craving, and we're actually receiving a lot of signals from different microbes in our system that are feeding off of those different types of foods. For example, like candida is a fungus that thrives off of sugar. So it can be really hard if you have a candida issue to stop eating sugar, because you're going to be craving it like crazy as soon as you cut it out. Um, and so there's ways to help eradicate those things and rebalance them while you're cutting them out so that it's more bearable and that the transition can be smoother. And also, like, the change of your taste buds over time is a direct result of the different microbes that are sending these signals, and
Th- that's it.
making your body crave these different things. So it takes time. It's an adjustment. And I've found with myself, like, once I was able to get to the other side of it and really get through that intense cravings that would make me dysregulated and make me really upset and like have all different types of things come up for myself, I stopped craving those foods. And with Nina in particular, this was the biggest loop that she really struggled with throughout her life, was French fries and chips and McDonald's foods. And a lot of non-speakers specifically have this traumatic relationship with food because it's been used as punishment and reward
Uh-huh,
and a reinforcer and all these in
uh-huh.
all these ways that have been really harmful and create some deep levels of loops or OCD. And unwinding that and really getting back to a healthy relationship with food has been the thing that has helped Nina more than anything else. And it was extremely challenging, but so worth it. And I really encourage parents to think about that because it might mean going through some of the upheaval and like the cravings coming up to and dealing with that and like having the tools to feel supported through that, to get to another kind of lifestyle so that you can have that be your new normal.
Well, that
Um
but you're so right when it comes to the craving piece of it. So candida and sugar was always my addiction. Always has been since I was very little. I've pretty much been off of most all sugars. I do maple syrup and some fruit and things such as that. But some honey occasionally. But coming off of that is very hard for me. And when I fasted in the past or things like that, I would feel sick and horrible just like coming off of all of those things and then just reducing it. The cravings were insane. So the part that I always say people when they say to me, "Well, it's a special occasion. Certainly you can have it today because it's a special occasion." And they'll do that to Joey too. And I go, "You don't understand. This special occasion is going to set me back and make tomorrow harder for everyone, for him, for me, everyone's it's going to set us back." And so this special occasion thing, which is really kind of people trying to talk you into it so they feel better about their own choices, is really you don't understand that you wouldn't say that to an alcoholic. You wouldn't give them a drink and say it's a special occasion because you know how hard it is for them to come off of it. And sugar is very much the same way, but it's even harder in the sense with sugar in the sense that you can't do it cold turkey. I mean, we live in a society, there's going to be sugar. I go to a restaurant and I want to have some barbecue. Well, it might be really hard to get that without any form of sugar. So then how do you kind of navigate all of it and keep it as low as you can? And so what we want to talk about is it's the gray area for the parents that often is the hardest. The
mhm.
black and white sometimes can be really, really simple, but food is such a gray area that it makes it about willpower. And it also is a comparison game because that's something I noticed as I've been doing this for 3 decades. And I've noticed that the comparison game was not a game that was played 20 years ago, but now it is. And by that, I mean, well, all the kids in the school eat this, all the kids on the team eat this. This is what my neighbors eat. This is everybody else. So it must be okay. And I'm not doing as bad as this one. And they start grading themselves on a curve.
Mhm.
When get out of that curve, get into your own routine with it and have as much control over it as you can now, because the older the children get, often the harder it is to be able to reel it in.
Mhm.
And how did you get Nina were you able to get Nina off of it?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, to your point, I really like that you brought up that it can be, it's sometimes easier to think of things as black and white and harder to exist in the gray area. And I think it can feel also really bleak for some people to be like, oh my gosh, am I going to have this restricted diet for my whole life? And I don't know how I'm going to do this. And it can feel just really challenging and difficult. And I think there's different times for different things. Like there might be a moment in time where you're seeing food as medicine and you're working with food in a super intentional way. And maybe you're getting rid of some things and you're adding in some other things, and you're making the experience an educational and joyful one. And at least for me, the goal is to create that more diversified, balanced microbiome and get myself to a level of health and security within myself so that I can have a more balanced life in my future. And maybe I'll have a cookie or, something in, in a special occasion, but that's not my everyday life. And it doesn't have to necessarily set me back or put me forward. It's just about having this balance. So for Nina, we have been able to really get her to this other place of having this healthier relationship with food. But it took changing her whole palate and cooking things that were delicious and making them really yummy with love, and, sitting with her and working through things with her that would come up around food, all of the different trauma, and having this love and support behind it as the why, not like
Yeah.
we're doing this to,
Then sort of
punish you.
punishment. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like
100%. Yeah.
it has to come from this place of, I deserve this. This is a privilege. This is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And making it a
Yes.
joyful experience. And I think we can also get really fixated on cutting things out and deleting and restricting and restricting. And I would really emphasize people to look into kitchen herbalism and how you can add things in. Like, okay, I can add in all these delicious teas and drinks and desserts and dishes that I never had before, and how can I diversify my food intake, and make my plates more colorful and bountiful and beautiful. Like that becomes exciting.
Yes, and that's a lesson that we learned from a lot of other cultures, because the United States is very strong on make it as simple as you can and don't really focus on flavor as much as just get the body fed with as many carbs and sugar as possible. Where if you could spend any amount of time in Southern Mediterranean, into the Middle Eastern, a lot of these cultures there, I spent some time in Bahrain and in Dubai, and was just mesmerized at the way in which they would use herbs within the food system, because they didn't have access in the desert to huge amounts of vegetables, but they could grow herbs, and the herbs would bring their nutrition into every meal. So if you're making for tabbouleh or some sort of a couscous or something, it was just loaded with chopped herbs, which ounce for ounce, herbs have way more antioxidants and healthy properties than a vegetable that's pretty much diluted in so many ways. So
Hmm.
that herbal piece incorporated into the food is one of the best and easiest things you could do. Joey does not get a bowl of rice unless I have some chopped parsley in it or some sort of other chopped vegetable into it. Mashed potatoes are going to have a little bit of cauliflower in them as well too. Maybe not all, not half and half, but a little bit of cauliflower in there. I always try to look for a way to take the strong carb and incorporate more plant into it. And I think that's what, when I was hearing you say, we were finding ways to make food delicious as
Hmm.
opposed to this kind of, I sometimes don't want to sit down and eat a giant bowl of bok choy.
Yeah.
It's like that can be kind
I
of
hear
boring
you.
for me too.
Yeah, of
But
course.
if you make some sort of a stir fry that has bok choy and some other great things into it and some wonderful rice, it's a different presentation. Is your mom much of a cook? I got to
Yeah,
meet your
she
beautiful
is.
mother. Okay,
She
she is.
is. That's why, like, I also think the beauty of connecting to food as medicine and to herbs is it really brings us back to our roots as people. Like I always say that herbalism is the study of plants and people and place, because it has so much to do with the cultural history and how they've been used for generations and generations, and the recipes get passed down, and it can be really fun to connect with that.
So true. And not just the herbalism, because spices aren't typically an herb, but used very much in the same way, the turmerics
Yeah,
and
a lot of
and
them
the
are,
cayenne
yeah.
and everything. And it's the same type of thing, like giving our food that additional flavor also is helping it become a healing food.
Yes, and speaking of flavors, this is a very big topic in the herbal world. You know, we talk about herbs a lot of times in relationship to their flavor because the flavor will tell us a lot about its medicinal properties. And there's some flavors that in our culture today we're not used to having in our palate. One that comes to mind all the time is bitter. So as an herbalist, I love bitter
I'm already,
taste.
you saw my notes for this class because I was just
Yeah.
like, we're talking about bitters. I know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
but so it's fascinating because a lot of plants have an extreme bitter taste. And the bitter taste can have this downward action and help us release things in our digestive system, and they're really well known for digestive health. And
And and
but
and and also and also incredibly affordable. If, going back to where we're saying, like, you can take digestive health can be a really expensive supplemental road to heal, but the simplicity of a drop of bitters into a glass of water can, for pennies, give you the same digestion that you need as a relatively expensive supplement.
totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it can be an adjustment, at the
Yeah,
beginning when you're tasting something for the first time that's
right.
extremely bitter. You may have never tasted something like that ever before, but then your body starts to adjust to it and actually crave it, and it's a way of tonifying the tissue and making your body more resilient. Um, so I really love bitters, and at the
Can we
same
talk
time,
about about that a little bit more though before we move on
yeah.
from the bitters, because I wanna know your favorites and I wanna know the methods in which you use the bitters.
Yeah. So a lot of bitters, because they have this extreme taste, they're and this downward energy, they also help a lot of times with embodiment and bring you into your body and making you feel grounded. So it's interesting when we talk about some bitters that overlap with nervines and can help us with anxiety or feelings of restlessness or overstimulation. Sometimes they're the same type of herb and they have different actions at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
one of my favorites that I use all the time is motherwort, and it's a very bitter herb that is well known for cardiac conditions and helping people to have less heart palpitations.
Okay.
It's also used a lot of times for public speaking or when you have that racing feeling in your body, but you really know what you want to say, but your body is kind of going against you. It helps soothe that and bring the energy down a little bit more and ground you.
What form do you take the
So
motherwort in?
the motherwort I take as a tincture because as a
Yeah,
tea, it's way too bitter. Like I don't
yeah.
think most people would enjoy drinking that.
And can I just give some tips for that as a picky
Yeah,
eating specialist? I just
sure.
wanted to say, so I agree with you. Tinctures are a good way to go because it's much easier to mix it in.
Yeah.
Teas can be very helpful for things like pau d'arco, which helps kill candida and things like that, just in small amounts. But and also for like dandelion, chamomile, all of those wonderful teas, very beautiful, mild flavor. And if you want to put a little bit of honey in there to sweeten them up, a little bit of lemon or whatever it is, that might be helpful.
Uh-huh.
Tincture, and especially a bitter tincture, can be really challenging for the palate. And with those, one of the things that I taught Joey to do relatively young was to guzzle a glass of water, like 3/4 of a cup to guzzle. And we did this kind of thing where it was just plain water and we would just do, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, gulp, 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 gulp. And we would just guzzle it. And that was just something that I practiced. After he got available at doing that, then it made it much easier to put in a drop of something because when you guzzle it, you're not tasting it. And when you're just putting in a drop in about 3/4 of water, it's pretty well nicely diluted.
Mhm.
So even for myself, who sometimes gets herbal suggestions from my practitioner, I'll put it in a glass of water and just do a quick guzzle. So that's just one way. Now you can also mix it in with a little bit of a good juice or make a lemonade out of it or something like that as well too. But just some tips so as parents are thinking, how am I even going to get this in?
Yeah, totally. And there's other ways to mix herbs too so that it tastes less bitter and that there's a different forward-facing
Tell
taste.
me, tell me, tell
Um,
me.
I mean, there's a whole nother kind of category of herbs called carminative herbs that are often used in cooking, like you were talking about earlier, like ginger and clove and
Oh,
cardamom and
right.
fennel. And these can have more of a pungent and aromatic taste, so they have a stronger
Yeah.
taste, and they because of that, they actually help, like, break up gas and bloating and stagnation in our digestive system. So, those are also good things to consider in combining.
Great suggestion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
another
absolutely.
thing that comes to mind just with non-speakers specifically, I don't think I mentioned this or at any point, but a big part of my journey has been with spelling and working with non-speakers so that they can have their own means of effective communication that's expressive and expansive for them. And all of that has to do with motor. So when you're dealing with these types of situations where you might be getting some pushback or resistance from somebody's body, but they're actually intending to do something totally different, it's just a disconnect with the actual movement that they're able to execute. It's all about breaking it down with the motor planning. So, um, you know, like you were teaching Joey how to guzzle the glass of water, you may have been like not realizing that you were breaking down the motor component to that and working with him that way. And that's been a huge thing that's made the difference for Nina because she'll tell me, like, I want to do this, but my body won't let me do this, you know?
Mm.
So it takes some time and practice to get that motor piece organized so that she can really do it autonomously or is smooth. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I mean, she kind of guided me with all of this with her own words, but she started out with I would make her teas and I would fill it up with these huge syringes. And she's like, okay, coach me to drink this like little by little, and you can help me with the syringe. And she would eventually like push the syringe herself and take it. But that took time, right? And then she's like, okay, I'm ready to transition now to drinking it. Like, and so she would pick up the cup and maybe she'd have a sip and like not drink anymore. But then we would coach her motor and she would be able to drink more and more and more. And then she's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I want this, I want this. So it's, I cannot stress the motor piece enough. That's a really important thing
It's
for
so
parents to
great.
know.
Thank you so much for bringing that up when it comes to a lot of parents, especially the young generation now, because, okay, so I'm just about to hit 60 and my generation was still a generation where you ate what was on the table. That was there was no negotiation. There was no special meal made for you. I can't even imagine in my household a special meal being made for me. But in your generation, Natalia, things changed a lot. Mostly because, as you said, food changed quite a bit. But the issue now is when first started studying picky eating, I was drawing on my own childhood of this isn't a negotiated subject. Okay. I'm going through my childhood. So I made it very matter of fact with my kids. Like my kids will tell you I was pretty strict with it. And there was no me bending because that was the way that I had known. But your generation now grew up many of you as picky eaters. And so you have incorporated more of that empathy. You're understanding the challenge of it, and you know your own challenges as having to switch over in the food. So you're much more empathetic, and therefore, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but more likely to bend, more likely to be talked into not going that direction because you see, well, I'm not going to do it. So I
Mhm.
certainly wouldn't expect you to do it. And this is something that I'm sure that you come across, is that when we're working with a child, as you as a practitioner, spelling practitioner, and myself working with the kiddos that I'm working with, the parent plays a very vital role, not just in a co-regulation piece, but also in their ability to see it as something that's beneficial enough to where they're doing it for themselves too. And that's where I lose the parents most of the time, is they are so overwhelmed at doing it for their child because they can't imagine doing it themselves. Is this something that
Mhm.
you see a lot?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And it's challenging because even in all the different areas, right? Like, I think the empowerment of the parent is what can make all the difference, but also having compassion for meeting people where they're at, you know? Um, I can't have expectations the same expectations for everybody. Everybody's in different positions because of many different factors. And so being able to account and acknowledge all of that, and at the same time kind of come up with this empowerment plan, or like protocol is how I call it, towards meeting these growing edges of like, okay, how can I
Yeah.
grow in this direction? And it might not happen overnight, but it really does start with me holding space and holding myself accountable to get to another level so that I can really be the best I can be. And I think when we frame it that way, there's a different energy around it. Like
Yeah.
we were saying about the punishment versus the joy, it's really no different in this case. It's like, okay, all of these things are actually loving to myself. All of these things are actually going to enhance my quality of life and help me show up for myself more deeply. So seeing it like that versus, oh, I have to do this, you know,
Sure.
and um,
I love my food.
yeah.
I I really, really love food, and I celebrate it. And I do not feel, when I make the pasta for the guys in my household, and I just have a bowl of sauce, maybe put it over some squash or something like that because I typically don't eat grains. I'm not saying to myself over and over again, I can't have this, I can't have this. To me, it's about making food that is feeding my body in a really beneficial way, but also just celebrating it and loving it. And I understand that many people don't know how to cook, and that makes it kind of challenging. And this is where I will give my shout out in case you aren't aware. I have a subscription. It's very inexpensive on my social media pages that gives you recipes, things that I'm making at the house for myself or for Joey or things such as that. And because I do feel that we are unaware about how easy it can be to cook, and now that we're starting to have this awareness of how, I don't know if you've been seeing a lot on social media, they've been talking so much about all of our food in these restaurants is coming from one source. It's all coming from like Cisco, and it's all the same stuff, and we are paying top dollar for very, very compromised, not good, slave labored food that is made in other countries. And we have to start cooking for ourselves more if we want to know what's in it. And it's not as hard as you think, because so many people see recipes online and it's so complex and you have to do this step and this step and this step. And I will tell you that the majority of meals that I make for my family take me between 15 minutes and maybe a half an hour to make for dinner. And okay, and then some cooking time that I'm not doing anything. But I mean, of my effort, it is extremely minimal. Having a rice cooker and making a pot of rice, done, bam, quick. quick stir fry, chopping, quickly putting it on the stove, quick, done, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe a slow cooked meat, and I love slow cooked meats because of the fact that you spend a few minutes preparing it, you throw it in the oven, and it magically comes out in about 7 hours with soft perfection. These
Hmm.
are all things that are not taking a lot of time to make, but are making a world of difference in how it is feeding and giving our body the nutrition that it needs.
Totally. I really agree. And what you were saying before was very important too, because I think there's a lot of reasons why our modern culture is really prioritizing like instant gratification and a quick fix and something like as fast as possible. And kind of getting out of that is is healthy in many ways,
Mhm.
and that's why even going into nature and like slowing down can be really beneficial for our nervous system, but also bringing that into our food and having more patience, and really
Yeah.
enjoying the process.
Yes.
um and there's a lot of things to research and to find out about organic food and the way that that process looks versus more conventional food in the grocery stores versus food that you get directly from a farmer's market or that's more local and seasonal. And I'm sure people can dive into that if they want to. But I would really just say, again, that focusing on whole foods as much as possible, including meat and or without meat, doesn't it's whatever works for somebody's body, is gonna be really, really healing in so many different ways versus food that comes from packages.
It's so true, and being able to go directly to a farmer, like, from the farmer's market makes a huge difference, and my big tip from a because I know when I talk a lot about the ease, it really is easy to make a dinner very, very quickly. Part of that ease comes from the fact that I have a freezer, and I would say of any appliance I own in my household is the most cost effective in my overall grocery budget is a freezer, because by going and buying a quarter of a cow or whatever it is that you might do, or being able to have frozen things in there and ready to go is what keeps you away from ordering DoorDash, because you've got like, I get up every single morning, Ron and I get up and we're like, "Okay, what are we gonna do for dinner that night?" Because I don't know if I have to take something out and let it defrost for the day. But if I had to say, "Do you wanna go to the grocery store? You want me to go to the grocery store?" That doesn't sound like a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
we wouldn't
So
do it.
so having that, like, that one where you go, you get enough vegetables for the week, wherever that might be at the farmer's market, having a freezer full of some meat that you can pull from, and then always having, like, big I always buy ridiculously large 10, 20-pound bags of rice and things like that, because
Hmm.
it's just one of those staples that I always just wanna have in my household, and I don't wanna have to keep buying it, and it's so much more affordable if you buy, like, giant bags of it. So there's
Yeah.
affordable ways of doing that, and also, if I could say one more thing, because I'm definitely we're getting low on time here, but the one thing is, if you're choosing to eat an animal, loving and appreciating the entire animal and not just the steak or not just the chicken breast, like, taking that animal and being able to, as I use the lard from it, from the pork, or the tallow from the beef, from using the slow cooked meats, using the organs as much as possible. And if you don't want to eat the organs, dehydrate them and give them to your animals, because they certainly love them. And being able to appreciate the animal as a whole, as opposed to just buying those same cuts of meat that you buy all the time, and then take all of those bones that you've gathered from eating those whole meats and making broth with them and making soup with them, because soup is one of the most affordable foods on the planet. Beans, soup, all of those things, so, so tremendously affordable. So there's
Mm.
lots of different methods of going about it. But you know what? They all go back to those herbs. They all go back to those herbs and spices because the herbs and the spices are what's giving it its liveliness, its taste, all the different flavors that we get from them. So that's why I'm so glad we had an opportunity to talk about that today.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for
I
so
know.
much
I have
longer.
like so much I want to say still, but I feel like we could
If
do a
you
whole
want to
nother
say any
time.
before we get off, I don't want to like if you have something mentally note that you want to make sure and add, please don't let me have the last word on this. You go for it.
Okay. I guess there are some like nourishing herbs that, depending on the person, are really well tolerated for most people, that are super rich in vitamins and minerals that you can make these strong infusions out of.
Okay.
The reason why I love some of them is because the wild food herbs are so nutritious, even more so than some of the vegetables that have been cultivated over time and lost a lot of their potency. So a few that come to mind are nettles, and
Nettles.
you can
That was the first thing that I hit. I'm like, oh, please talk about nettles because I
I
love
love
them.
yeah, me too. And people have, I mean, everybody's different, right? So
Yeah,
feel it out for yourself, but making a really strong overnight infusion of nettles is a really good multivitamin. And oat
I
straw
drink
is
needle tea. I drink nettle tea every day. Every day.
yeah, it's
I nettle tea
awesome.
is it's great for allergies, all
Yes,
the iron, all those great minerals. Yes. I'm so glad you talked
exactly.
about that. And if you know somebody with a farm, they likely have nettles growing wild like crazy, and you can cultivate it and just bag it and dry it and have it for free for an entire year because it's such an
Yeah.
affordable herb to grow.
Yeah, it's considered a wild weed. And oat straw is another really gentle herb that's super full of minerals, that you can also make a really strong infusion out of and just drink it throughout the day, and you can drink it every day. Burdock root is another one that I
Yes.
really love as a food herb.
I try to like the taste of that. I
It's hard for
try.
some people.
It's just not one of my favorites, but I know it's really good.
Yeah. So those are like three easy ones to get started with. There's linden too that I also
Yeah,
like. That's very soothing and calming. Um, Tulsi is another beautiful herb.
I know. I do the
There's
holy basil supplement again because I don't like as much the taste, but I take holy basil every day, which is
yeah.
yeah.
There's so much I wanted to touch
I
on
know.
too with
All
like
right, let's
we can,
we just have to do this
okay,
again.
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
Because there's like
promise.
adaptogens that would be really
Yeah,
good
I
for
know. We didn't even get
stress.
into the
I
fungus
know.
piece. Like, there's so much about mushrooms we have to talk about. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's plan on doing this again, maybe in another month, and because let's continue this. Let's just do a part two because I agree. There's just way too much that we have to talk about,
Yeah.
and yeah. Okay, you're amazing. I'm so glad we're friends. Can you talk just real quickly about the telepathy tapes, season 2? Your involvement with that.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been working with Kai and Jill, who are producers on the Telepathy Tapes podcast, to create this episode all about plant communication. So it's really exciting. It's going to be exploring how plants communicate with other plants and interspecies communication,
Yeah.
and if it's possible for humans and plants to connect, which
Incredible.
sneak peek, I think it is. So, I mean,
I doubt it would be on the telepathy tapes if there wasn't some form of communication. That's really good.
yeah. And
Do you
then
know
the
what
other,
episode it's going to be?
I believe it's coming out on November 19th.
It's good to know.
And then the other thing was that we have a small center in Connecticut called Flowering Futures, which is where I work with neurodivergent non-speakers, and I practice the purposeful motor skills to point to letters and spell out their thoughts, and work with them on that really closely. And that was started with Nina and I. And the name really comes from all of this, which is being able to envision a beautiful future of blooming and becoming who you really
Ugh.
are. And I feel like that's the gift of spelling, because you could see like everybody has this growth and this potential within them and so much to express and so much to say. And it's just about being able to get that out and blossom into who you really are. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that too.
And you're in Fairfield, Connecticut?
Yeah, we're in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Which is
currently.
where my guy Ron went to Fairfield Prep. That's where he went to school. I know.
That's so great.
So we're planning a grassroots trip for him. Probably we're thinking maybe in the springtime. So I would love to come out and visit you.
Oh my gosh, come by! We're right here.
So fun. I know, it's so great. Okay. And then where can they find you on social media?
So my name is Natalia Meehan on Instagram. My sister Nina has a nonprofit, and her Instagram handle is the Nina Foundation. And then we have flowering.futures, which we just restarted our Instagram on there. And we have
that's
our
also
website.
on Instagram. Okay.
Yeah, our website is just floweringfutures.com.
Yeah. And okay, great. I will have all of those in the notes for anybody, for no matter what stream you're streaming this on. I'll have all of that in the notes.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Natalia. I appreciate it.
Have a great day. Thank you
too.
for having
We'll be
me.
talking very soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.